pa ako. I'll be moderating today's press conference. And for today, we have with us the House Economic Vanguards and Fiscal Guardians, House Senior House Committee on Appropriation Senior Vice Chairperson and Marikina City Second District Representative Ma'am Stella Luz Kimbo, and House Committee on Ways and Means Chairman and Albay Second District Representative Congressman Joey Sarti Salceda. They are here now to discuss the President's recent call for amending the restrictive economic provisions of the Constitutions and other hot issues of the day. Ma'am and sir, do you have your opening remarks before we open the floor to media queries?
Sige po. Payagan niyo po ako magbigay ng opening statement, pang-warm up. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Thank you for joining us today. The Philippine Statistics Authority has reported robust 5.6% GDP growth in the last quarter of 2023, marking a year of resilient economic performance. We have also made notable strides in inflation management, with the rate decelerating significantly to 2.8% in January 2024 from a high of 8.7% the previous year. However, our flourishing economy faces a critical challenge. The growth of foreign direct investments, or FDIs, is not keeping pace with our other economic gains. Over the last decade, the Philippines garnered $83.5 billion in gross FDI inflows, a figure that trails that of our ASEAN neighbors. For comparison, Indonesia and Vietnam drew in $220 billion and $137 billion respectively. The first 3 quarters of 2023 alone saw a worrisome 15.9% drop in net FDI inflows as reported by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. This signals to us that we must invigorate our FDI growth or we will be unable to compete with the economies in our region. As we attempt to navigate the complex landscape of our nation's economic future, the data before us are clear. Our economic charter, as it stands, is a 20th century text that urgently needs to be updated to meet the demands of a 21st century global economy. Our pursuit of economic liberalization to date has been cautious and incremental. But the evidence before us calls for a decisive shift. Consider data from the 2016 Annual Survey of Philippine Business and Industry. Firms with foreign ownership are 5.4 times larger in book value. They employ 4 times more workers. They offer 70% higher salaries and benefits compared to domestically owned enterprises. These figures make a compelling case for embracing a more open economy. Pag dumami ang ganitong foreign-owned firms sa ating bansa, dadami ang trabaho at tataas ang sahod. Furthermore, increased competition, improved efficiency, innovation, and the introduction of new technologies. Ito po ang karanasan ng ibang bansa. It is crucial to understand that the journey towards economic liberalization through amendments to the economic provisions of our Constitution is not intended to sideline critical initiatives aimed at enhancing the ease of doing business, particularly reducing the cost of power or combating corruption. It is not a choice between one or the other. These efforts are indispensable and will only be complemented, not substituted, by economic charter change. The reforms we advocate for will go side by side and amplify our efforts to improve business conditions. In short, economic charter change is not sufficient on its own, but it is undeniably necessary. This endeavor is part of a broader set of reforms needed to propel our country forward. It conveys our readiness to embrace substantial foreign investment and our commitment to being serious players on the international stage. Historically, piecemeal liberalization has brought us modest gains, but it is not enough. We have experienced boom-bust cycles, and our current trajectory, while positive, calls for a bold leap. The benefits of such a transformation are manifold: increased productivity, job creation, higher wages, and a greener environment. The restrictions on foreign equity in sectors such as mass media, public utilities, educational institutions, and natural resource development serve their purpose in a different era. Today, they limit our competitiveness and capacity for innovation. These sectors must be revitalized with new ideas and capital. The need for change is further underscored by the lost opportunities in agriculture, manufacturing, and creative industries, sectors that remain underdeveloped due to restrictive economic laws. The proposed charter change is about making our economy more flexible and responsive, allowing us to protect our industries while adeptly responding to economic opportunities. Economic Chacha, which merely is for the reduction of inflexibilities rather than prescribing its parameters, is not about opening the floodgates to undermine local stakeholders, but about laying the groundwork for intelligent and sustainable foreign investment that complements our local industries. It is about building a competitive economy that uplifts every Filipino and is agile enough to flourish in the face of global shifts. Agility requires responsive legislation. Let me be clear on this. Charter change is not a panacea for all our country's economic ills. Dapat may gamot din para sa korupsyon, sa red tape, at sa mahal na kuryente. Charter change, however, is one of the medications we need to have an economy fit enough to run and keep in step with our competition. Econ Chacha is a clear signal to the world that this is a new Philippines, flexible, equipped to adapt, and ready to engage with foreign investors and compete with our neighbors. It should also be a firm and constant reminder to us, especially in government, to fix all that are broken to make businesses thrive and jobs grow. Thus, Econ Chacha is an urgent and necessary step towards unleashing our full economic potential. It is a commitment to our people's prosperity, a more competitive Philippines, and a resilient future. We have spent the past 3 decades debating about this issue while opportunities have passed us by. The time for talk is over, and the time for action is now. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Congresswoman Estela, for your very insightful remarks. Before we hear the opening remarks of Chairman Joey, we acknowledge the presence of Deputy Speaker Suarez. Welcome, sir.
I'm just here to listen and learn from the best.
Yeah, good morning. I think we are now getting into the more constructive phase of the national conversation on charter change. The President was very clear before one of the largest assemblage of the Philippine intelligentsia, basically 500 people in one room, the MOPC, and he was very clear that we need to change the economic provisions of the Constitution, and second, that we will limit that national conversation to economic provision. So, klarong-klaro na siguro kailangan pag-usapan at klarong-klaro na rin kung anong gagawin po ng House. So, ibig sabihin yan, tigil na muna ang PI dahil para mawala po yung duda na mahaluan ng politika kasi klaro naman sinabi ni Presidente, hoy, hanggang economics lang kayo. Ang dali-dali po kasi idikit sa People's Initiative yung konsepto po ng politika. So, Yan po ang klarong-klaro. So, ibig sabihin, we're going through a more constructive process in the relationship between the House and the Senate. But syempre, may mga komplikasyon po dyan dahil nga po kung syempre, hindi rin mawawala na baka masyadong patagalin o masayang yung panahon. Sinabi na nga po ni Chairman Stella na ito ay very, very urgent na dahil ang competition sa buong mundo, dahil kung titingnan mo yung buong mundo sumisikip, dahil nga po dun sa mga pinataas na interest rate ng US. So nasa panahon tayo po ng isang very global environment which is more competitive, possibly hindi masyadong lumalago. Although sinasabi nila from 2.9 tataas pa ng 3.1 yung pagtaas ng mundo. Dahil lang po yan doon sa mga developing countries. Pero yung mga merkado natin na malalaki, ay bukang sila po ay nasisikipan. Dahil po nasa 5.5% yung interest ngayon para mangutang sa buong mundo. So, ibig sabihin yan, yung pampamumuhunan sa labas halimbawa ng Estados Unidos o ng OECD, magiging mas lalong masikip. So, doon tayo makikipagbunuan sa ibang countries. So, ibig sabihin, kung tayo magpapahuli na naman, baka wala na tayong abutan. Kaya, sinasang-ayunan ko po yung mga datos. May dalawang bagay lang po talaga akong laging pinapakita. Bakit gusto ko po talaga itong charter change sa ekonomiya. Unang-una, sa buong Asia, ayan, tayo na lang ang may namamatay dahil sa malnutrition. 5% of all deaths due to malnutrition. The rest of the other countries, virtually zero. So, nagpapakita na it's not working. Number 2, yung pagdating po sa ating pong poverty rate, talagang napakataas na. Ilang tumbling na tayo simula pa kay Gloria, kay Ma'am Gloria pala. Nagsimula tayo sa 34, hindi na tayo makababa sa 20. So yung lumabas kamakailan, nasa 23% pa rin yung population. Pero yung although hindi na I think it is already the moral duty of Congress to look at the structural causes why people are dying of malnutrition. And second, why our poverty is virtually stubbornly structural. So, sa tingin ko, there's already a consensus among many economists that we need to change the Constitution, the economic provisions of the Constitution. Yun lang.
Thank you for your very valuable remarks, Chairman Joey. May we hear from Deputy Speaker Suarez?
Thank you very much. Actually, I was
Assigned.
more interested in listening to Joey and Stella, being the premier economists of the House when it comes to this matter. I think given the recent statements of our President, I think it was over the weekend, number one, it was a validation to the efforts of the House, led by Speaker Martin Romualdez, when we wanted to lift the economic restrictions. And I think Joey and Stella reasoned out perfectly the reasons why. And at the same time, it's a vindication also for the House, given all these absurd insinuations and bad misrepresentations about the intent of the House when it comes to charter amendments. Klaro-klaro naman na gusto lang po namin pag-usapan ay yung economic restrictions. And at any given day and time, if the opportunity will present itself. I wish that the Senate will engage in a healthy debate about the economic provisions, and itataya ko itong dalawang to, si Joey at saka si Stella, na mag-head ng House contingent para harapin yung Senado para patunayan kung bakit kinakailangan na po natin buksan ng ating ekonomiya para mapatunayan na matagal na po itong kinakailangan ng ating bansa.
Thank you for your very important remarks.
Pwede ko ba sumayin aming tatlo?
Sige, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Follow the president. Yun po talaga ang suma total nitong usapin sa ngayon. The House will follow the president. Period. So let there be no other ambiguity about it, of the direction of the House, what the House will do. We will follow the president in his latest speech at the MOPC.
Thank you, sir. Before we open the floor to for media questions, allow me first to read a phone-in question from our colleague.
May ganun na pala kayo.
Yes, sir. Maaga tong nagpadala. From Joby De La Cruz of Business World. If I may, to anyone, sir, ma'am, what are your thoughts on the President's proposal to amend the Constitution, particularly focusing on the restrictive economic provisions? Why do you believe that enacting the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, the Public Services Act, and the Foreign Investment Act are sufficient to attract foreign direct investments? I understand there is a pending legal issue before Supreme Court.
Number one, the President's main governing theme is unity. So he's very careful about public perception and anything that has to do with the EDSA 86, especially its articulation, the Constitution. He's careful not to be perceived as dismantling the 1987 Constitution, as he has been careful about all other vestiges of the 86 Revolution. Sabi ko mas dilawan pa to kay Pinoy. So for the President to come out in support of charter change, despite his usual reservations on such matters, clearly show that he sees this as urgent and of the highest notch. This is the first time he has deviated from that position. If you look back since he ascended or during the campaign, hindi ito naging issue nung 2022 election. Yung FDI trio na siyempre halos is the trademark of my good friend Stella, were a significant step in the right direction, but we have repeatedly emphasized that if foreigners cannot own or have more secure tenure over assets in this country, whether they be land, they will be less willing to invest heavily on capital-intensive sector. Simple nga example na yung land reform. Noong pinalayas mo yung landlord, wala nang pagkukunan ng kapital, wala na mag-i-invest dun sa irrigation. Wala na siyang mautangan. Di ba? Yung farmers, wala na siyang, di siya makabali. Kasi wala na yung landlord. Ang landlord dapat doon gobyerno. Hindi naman kinaya. So our colleagues in Congress have diverse opinion on the issue of foreign ownership of land. And I expect vigorous debate on the subject, but my personal view as an economist is that we need to open up land to assert even to some form of foreign ownership. Our most capital-starved sector is agriculture. In 2022, the only investment in agriculture was 1.3 billion out of 242 billion. Only 1.4 billion, 1.3 in approved foreign investments. On the Supreme Court case, the fact that the court has not issued a temporary restraining order in the PSA speaks of what I think is likely to uphold the generally well-established legislative power of economic matters. Ibig sabihin, na walang TRO sa PSA, ibig sabihin, nire-respeto ng Supreme Court ang primacy ng Congress sa pagtatalaga ng mga patakaran sa ekonomiya. Yun ang sagot ko kasi dalawang question yun eh.
Thank you, sir.
Dadagdagan ko lang. Yung pag-amyenda po ng Public Service Act, Retail Trade Act, at yung Foreign Investment Act, yun po ay tatlo sa masasabi nating landmark laws na pinasa ng 18th Congress. So, kinailangan natin ito dahil nga mayroong restrictive economic provisions ang ating Constitution. Kumbaga, yan na ang second best. Ito na ang pwede nating gawin para buksan pa further ang ating ekonomiya. At masasabi natin na to a limited extent successful. Kasi nung nilabas po ng NEDA ang IRR ng amendments ng PSA, ang dami pong pumasok na investors, particularly sa energy sector. At kung hindi po ako nagkakamali, of the 1.3 trillion pesos na pumasok na investments, ang 800 po doon, 800 billion, ay para lamang sa energy sector. So, klaro na kapag binubuksan natin, if we build them, if we open, they will come. Okay. Ang tanong, ang telcos ay binuksan din natin. Pero, ang tanong, bakit wala pang pumapasok, Chair Joey at DSJJ? Kasi, masasabi natin, baka naman may ambiguities pa. Pag binasa po natin na mabuti ang PSA amendments, mayroong bagong category, which is the critical infrastructure, na kasama din ang telcos doon. So on one hand, tinanggal natin ang telcos sa listahan ng public utilities, but on the other hand, ipinasok natin ang isang bagong category called critical infrastructure na kasama din ang telcos. At ang critical infrastructure can be accorded protection in a sense, subject siya to 60-40, to the 60-40 restriction on foreign ownership if pumasa siya or nabigyan siya ng exemption due to national security concerns. Okay, ang sinasabi ko doon sa opening statement ko, ang pinaka-value ng Econ Chacha is the signal. Signal po siya sa buong mundo na totoo na to. For many years, tayo po ay nag-liberalization Chacha. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Hindi sure ang buong mundo, ano pa talaga ang gusto ng Pilipinas? Mag-open up ba o hindi? Kasi maya't maya, nag-open up tayo, and then babawiin natin. Urong-sulong, urong-sulong. Finally, ang kailangan natin, eto na. Bubulagain natin ang buong mundo, lilinisin natin ang ating Constitution because generally speaking, ang economic policies ay nasa legislation, wala po sa Constitution. Tayo lang po ang one of the very few in the world na nasa Constitution mismo ang restrictions sa pagdating ng foreign direct investments. Okay, I go back to my point. May amendments na tayo sa Public Service Act. Malinaw na senyales para sa energy, baka hindi malinaw na senyales para sa ibang sector, very important sector, particularly telcos. Kayo po ba? Masaya ba kayo sa inyong cellphone service provider? Matagal na natin gustong pumasok ang third player. Kung natatandaan po ninyo, 2017, kamuntik-muntikan na po pumasok ang Telstra. Kamuntik-muntikan na silang magbenta. Meron na silang mga stalls, but last minute they decided, ayaw na namin sa Pilipinas because there's so much unpredictability in the regulatory environment. Sinubukan natin magpasok ng third player through the NTC, through the PCC. Hanggang ngayon, wala pa. So, baka pag nilinis na natin, tinanggal natin ang restrictions, or nilagyan natin ng phrase unless otherwise provided by law, that will be finally the clearest signal to our foreign investors, including possible entrance into the telco sector na eto na, sigurado na ang Pilipinas sa kanilang gustong gawin, which is to open up the economy. And yun na lang po. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker Suarez. Okay. Our first physical question from Kat Forbes of Radio Pilipinas. Go ahead, Kat.
Good morning po, mga hosts.
baliktarin ko. Hindi makakatulong, i-delay mo. Di ba? So, the earlier, the better. Kasi, sinet mo 2025. May batas pa. Alam mo, paka-approve natin itong economic chacha. Sana naman ay maging affirmative nga yung there are two prongs unless provided for by law. Pero sasabihin namin yan, open na siya, close siya unless provided for by law. Yan yung ngayong pagka-bigkas. Baka pwede naman sabihin, open siya subject to restriction provided for by law. Kung ganon, hindi masyado tayo mamamroblema kasi at least from the very start, open na siya. So, nandun ako sa posisyon na yon. Although, syempre, para po talaga, it's easier to come up with a consensus na it's closed first unless legislators open it up, which is, So, it will take time. So, baka abutin tayo ng 18 months bago yung mga gusto natin buksan, mabuksan. Halimbawa, sabi ng Senate, yung basic education, kung saan tayo, we're number 78 overall sa PISA. Tapos yung pang gusto nilang pigilan na pumasok ang foreign competition. So, para bang, if you look at the PISA, yung pang sabi nila, basic education will be closed, is only tertiary that will be opened up. So, may konting sense yun kasi yung tertiary means immediately employable yung mga yun, di ba? Pero ang problema natin is in the basic So, mukhang mas kailangan nga natin doon ng foreign technology, foreign education methodologies. So, halimbawa, anong meaning nun? Pag dinagyan mo ng numero doon, yung share ng GDP ng private education ay 90.94%. So, pag aalisin mo yung basic, so yung incremental na manggagaling po doon sa Senate is only 0.47 ang magiging epekto sa kalahati lang. Imbis na full 1% ang impact sa GDP, magiging 0.47% na lang. So may mga numero, inilagay ko dito yung lahat ng numero, i-post ko na lang mamaya siguro kung sakaling gusto nyo isa-isahin. Private education, advertising, power, petroleum, etc., until real estate, so including natural resources.
Dagdagan ko lang ang napakagandang sagot ni Chairman. Well, una sa lahat, you will not disagree with us. Kulang ang trabaho dito. Tama? Ano ang pruweba? Napakaraming OFW. Ganun na lang natin tignan. Tumalabas po ang ating mga kababayan, iniiwan nila ang kanilang mga pamilya, asawa at anak, dahil lamang sa trabaho. So kulang ang trabaho locally. So yun ang gusto nating tugunan. Kulang ang trabaho dahil kulang ang kapital. Okay, so ang pagbubukas ng ating ekonomiya by way of, again, signaling to the world that we are a flexible economy. Yan ang problema ng ating restrictive economic provisions in the Constitution kumpara sa ibang bansa. Inflexible po ang pagtingin nila sa atin. Kasi ito nga pong constitutional, itong tsa-tsa, ang hirap-hirap gawin. So, kung merong mali, ganito kahirap po bago baguhin. Whereas, kung wala po siya sa Constitution at mali po siya, pwede po kaming makipagpuyatan dito sa Congress. Ready po kami. Kaya siyang baguhin in 1 week. Technically speaking, as long as sinabi ng Presidente, urgent po yan. Magpuyat kayo. Kayang gawin in 1 week. Pero pag Constitution, ito po, ilang dekada na nating pinagdedebatihan, pinagkukwentuhan, hindi tayo makagalaw. So ang pagtingin po ng isang foreign investor sa atin, inflexible tayo. Yun ang kailangan nating tugunan, ayusin. So by doing that, clear signal na ngayon, bago na ang Pilipinas, flexible na siya, hindi katulad dati. Yan po ang magdadala po ng kapital at Anong evidence? Nangyari na po sa energy sector dahil lamang sa pag-amyenda ng Public Service Act. So hopefully, with wider changes, ay mas mahagip natin ang iba pang mga sektor. Okay. Pagdating sa timelines, isang Congress, 3 years, ibig sabihin 3 regular session, 1 session is SONA to SONA, hindi po ba? Sa isang taon, ang kalahati po doon, busy po kami sa budget. Tama? The remaining time, most of that, nakatuon po sa LEDAC priorities. So kahit na merong pressing need to do something like this, which is charter change, the reality is, ang konti talaga ng panahon na pwede talagang maibuhos na para dito. Gayunpaman, we set time. At ang proof is over 300 bills have been filed in Congress. At halos every Congress na-approve naman dito po sa lower house. So, ginagawan pa rin ng paraan. So, why am I saying this? Para sa amin, we need to act now, all the time. Pagdating sa charter change, dahil napakakaunting oras ang natitira, it is ripe. Meaning to say, nandiyan ang problemang malaki, kailangan natin tugunan. Ripe for action. But number 2, we have to do it now. Why? Kasi bukas, dadating na ang budget, mauubusan na kami ng panahon. So talagang, ang mindset po namin dito sa Kongreso, now na, at any point in time, because of the very, very tight timelines. At sa totoo lang po, may distrito po kaming inaalagaan. So yun po ang binding constraints, yun ang practical considerations ng mga miyembro ng Kongreso. So, katulad ng sinasabi po ni Chair Joey, sooner rather than later ang pagtingin po namin pagdating sa timeline ng Econ Chacha.
Yeah. Just to add, no, I totally disagree with the proposal of having the plebiscite alongside the midterm elections next year. Unang-una, pinaliwanag na po ni Professor Stella at ni Professor Joey kung bakit kinakailangan natin madaliin ang usapin. Ngayon, doon sa sinasabi nilang isasabay nila sa midterm elections yung plebiscite, we have to consider, mga kasama, ang election, masyadong personalan yan. Ngayon, ipopoliticize mo yung constitution, isasabi mo sa election, I don't think that will be a prudent decision, especially if we're talking about the merits of the Constitution. So my suggestion is to have it earlier. And I think Stella has just justified why we need to have it earlier. Because after the Senate acts and the House will meet, and assuming we agree in everything, ipaplebisito mo pa yan. At pagkatapos mo iplebisito yan, tapos na yung amendment sa Constitution, gagawa pa kami ng batas para ma-operationalize yung pagbabago doon sa Constitution na yan. So it's still another process. Now, if you're gonna delay this process by having a plebiscite next year, then it will be assumed by the 20th Congress doon sa mga batas na kinakailangan para i-operationalize. So kung bibilangin mo, mauubusan ka na naman ng 3 taon. At ilan na lang taon na natitira sa Marcos administration para talagang mayangat natin yung ating ekonomiya. You're talking about 2027 and 2028. And we all know by 2027, 2028, everybody's preparing for the presidential elections already. So kaya nga kami, I am one with Stella, I am one with Joey, we need to do this now. And we can't waste time when it comes to amending our constitution on this matter. No?
Thank you, sir. May we hear the next question from Elson Kismorio of Manila Bulletin.
Hello po, Congressman. Good morning po. If I may read an excerpt from BBBN speech doon po sa shop. In any event, this administration is going to push hard to attract more foreign investments to significantly help us achieve our ambition of upper middle class status by 2025. Do you think po this is PBBM's very diplomatic way of giving an ultimatum to the senators? Because it's already 2024, busy po tayo dito sa Congress. Do you think the President drew a line with that statement?
If you run the numbers, historically, the GNI per capita has grown 4.44% since 2012 per annum. So the kind of growth that opens FDI with an open FDI is exactly the kind you need to reach upper middle income status by 2025. Upper middle income status begins at USD 4,256 GNI, gross national income per capita. We are at around 3,950. So the threshold is expected to be at 4,466 by 2025. So we need to grow our GNI per capita by a compounded 13% between 2024 and 2025 to make it or around 6% per year in 2023 and 2024. Post ko na lang para hindi kayo maguluhan. Alam niyo po, meron kaming stat nagsasabi na ang FDI to GDP natin ay nasa 2% on the average. Pag bubuksan mo yung mga sektor, halimbawa yung sa Senado na lang, yung sa Senado aabot ng 4%. Pero kung yung dati naming RBH 6, yung original RBH 2, aabot po ng 16.7. So, sakto-sakto kung yung House version sana, yung sinabi ni Pangulo ay mararating po na, ma-achieve po natin through the sheer force of an open foreign direct investment regime dito po sa atin.
So it sounds like an ultimatum po ba to you?
Sa akin,
Yeah.
nasa panahon na tayo ng constructive conversation eh. So yung mga ultimatum will not work. So setting certain certain milestones, parang kumbaga sa pag di mo ako sinagot ng April 14 sa Valentine, hindi naman ibig sabihin kinabukasan hindi ka na pwedeng sagutin, di ba? So pero siyempre it's a way of saying na your behavior as legislators have real implications on the welfare of the country. That is the way I look at it rather than, putting ultimatum. Kung ano man ang gawin namin, hindi namin gawin, may epekto yan sa pangkalatang kalagayan po ng ating bansa.
Well, kumbaga po sa isang tatay na meron 2 anak na nag-aaway sa isang public na ganap, 'di ba? Imbis na pagalitan sa harap ng publiko, ay sasabihin na lang, mga anak, bakit hindi na lang ito ang gawin ninyo? Pagdebatihan na lang ang isang productive na question, 'di ba? So tingin ko it's a way of him telling, it's addressing us, both chambers, that this is the productive direction. Ganun ang pagtingin ko.
I guess, ma'am, it just struck me na the President gave a date, a year and a clear goal. So, yun lang po. Yes po, yes.
Well, I think when the President gave a date and a clear goal, it's up to the legislative branch to cooperate and to make sure that that objective is met. So now looking at where we are now and what needs to be done, I think those are the processes that has to be clearly determined and defined para masiguro natin na by 2025, yung ninanais ng ating Pangulo ay makamit ng ating bansa.
Thank you. Mr. Gablalo of Inquirer Online for the next question.
May estimates na po ba? For example, if ma-amend yung Constitution this year, may estimates ba kung gaano katagal bago ma-actualize or
sa stock market, ramdam ka agad yan.
Immediate, sir.
Oh yeah.
Signal yun eh.
Sobrang signal
Signaling
yan.
effect.
Ibig sabihin, biglang bukas. Ngayon kasi, pag tingnan mo stock market, mukhang patay. Kasi nga, yung mga shares, pag-aari lang ng mga Pinoy. Pero pag sinabi mo yung mga shares doon, pwede nang bili ng foreigners. Biglang aakyat. Makikita nyo kaagad yan. So, there is an immediate, there's an intermediate, as well as long-term impact. But the immediate impact will be in the stock market. The intermediate impact will be in terms of the approvals ng mga IPAs sa ng BOI. Makikita mo doon yung mga approved foreign investment. Then, in the long term, yung pag pumasok na mismo po yung... Kasi ang kulang sa Pilipinas, walang makina. Puro tayo telepono, alam nyo ba yun? Ang meron talaga tayo dito, if you look at our approved investment, kalahati sinabi na niya, kuryente. Yung kalahati actually is ICT. Basically, BPO. Kalahati ng investment sa Pilipinas, puro BPO. So pag tinignan mo yan, paano yan kung halimbawa biglang di katulad halimbawa na agrikultura, may lupa, may irrigation. Ang manufacturing naman, may factory, may makina. Pero ang BPO, hindi ko sa minamaliit yun. I think we are too service-oriented for as an economy. We need to diversify. First, we need to rebuild our basic sectors, which is agriculture. Kung mabubuksan yung lupa, nakaw, sabihin ko sa iyo, nandun talaga sisipa yun. Dahil simula 1989, kung saan natin nilagay yung CARP, na-atomize natin yung pag-aari ng lupa, so bumagsak yung productivity, pati production, kaya mahal ang presyo ng pagkain. Kasi wala nang kapital yung farmer, hindi naman nabigyan ng Pilipinas, hindi naman nabigyan ng gobyerno. So if we can do that, so that one could easily be, because by sheer force of clustering of the farms, then you can have economies of scale, and therefore higher productivity, and therefore lower prices. Kasi you get more for less, because halimbawa, imbis na yung one manager managing one farm is just another manager managing 5 hectares of farms. So I think that is the way. So pero yung stock market will definitely puputok po yun.
In other words, yung mga kumpanya na by opening up the economy ay magiging more attractive to foreign investors, and they are listed. Ang sinasabi ni Chair Joey, ang mga stock prices ng mga yon ay aasahan natin immediately tataas. So apart, pag binuksan natin, nirelax natin ang mga economic provisions, apart from the FDI flows coming in, may signal ka agad na na-generate. Right now, sa totoo lang po, hard sell tayo eh. Kinakailangan magpadala tayo ng isang buong diplomatic mission headed no less by the President to go to each and every country. At pansinin niyo, pag umuwi ang trade mission, successful. Kasi nakikita nila eh. Pag pupunta tayo doon, pinapakita lahat ng documents and we make the case for it. Naniniwala sila. Nakikita nila na, ganyan pala sa Pilipinas, etc. And therefore, nakakakuha tayo ng investment pledges. Very retail siya. Diba? Pero kung meron tayong ginawang ganito, wholesale siya eh. Sa ngayon, ang inaasahan lang natin is the inflows coming from the trade mission. Wala tayo na-generate na signal that impacts immediately on the stock market. Whereas, if we do economic chacha, we do 2 things immediately. One is pangmalawakan na senyales, baka hindi na natin kailangan magpadala ng mission sa bawat bansa kasi alam na ng buong global investors community na, ito ng Pilipinas, bukas na sila. Diba, hindi na natin kailangan sabihan isa-isa to make a pitch. And at the same time, sinasabi ni Con Joey, stock market prices.
Sir, second question. Last week po kasi si Congressman Ace Barbers mentioned he's willing to
Sayang, wala dito si Ace.
Sir, kasi of course napag-uusapan to sa mga caucus ng mga leaders. Baka meron ng update regarding that, nakapag-usap na yung House and Senate.
Well, the House has always been open to discussions with our counterparts in the Senate, especially what we've seen and what we've heard in the last few weeks. But I think it should not be taken or misunderstood. May nabasa kasi ako na sinabi na binubuli daw namin yung Senate. No, not at all. We're not bullying the Senate. I think what the Senate is realizing now is we have a House of Representatives that is more vocal. Kasi dati, nag-aantay lang kami kung anong gagawin ng Senate, nag-aantay lang kami, tahimik, kung anong magiging development. But right now, you see the aggressiveness of members of the House when it comes to tackling national issues. And now, of course, with Chair Joey and Professor Stella, you can see that when it comes to economic provisions of amending the constitutions, it's something that is very close to the heart of congressmen as well. That's why we are pushing hard that we amend the constitution. Now, with regards to relations, I think relations are strong. If there are anything and if there are any talks that need to be done, I'm sure Speaker Martin Romualdez will be more than open to hear, listen, and talk to our counterparts in the Senate.
We recognize the presence of Senior Deputy Speaker Aurelio Don Gonzales Jr. Welcome, sir.
Ayun na ako sa likod mo.
Dito ko na lang po.
Support lang. Support.
Si Roger.
Nakita ko lang si Joey tsaka si Stella.
Ha!
Ano yan?
Boss Pader.
Let us recognize Marian Enriquez of Channel 5 for her question.
Okay, baka gusto natin po mag-comment kay DS. Since na-mention po kasi ni Senator Nancy B na yung kanyang Chinese New Year wish sa sana daw mag-grant is stop parliamentary bullying. Hindi naman tayo dapat mawalan ng pag-asa, di ba? Hindi naman masama mangarap. Sana pagpasok namin sa Lunes, manahimik na sila.
Well, yun nga yung sinasabi ko na
Palampasin na lang yan.
wala namang bullying na nangyayari. I think what the Senate is seeing is that the House is more vocal when it comes to national issues. The House is more vocal talking about issues close to their heart. The House is reacting to what is happening in our country. And in any democracy, that should be a welcome development, if I mean to say, to take things lightly. So, ako naman, ang Valentine's wish ko para kay Senator Nancy ay sana let love rule.
Wow.
Yes.
Di ba? So, kung let love rule, mahalin natin yung bansang Pilipinas, bilisan nila yung pagpapapasa ng RBH 6 para magawa na namin sa House yung trabaho natin at maayos na natin tong saligang batas.
Well, sa akin, una sa lahat, happy Valentine's sa Nancy at sa lahat ng mga senators. Ano naman po kami, I think lahat naman tayo dito ay peace-loving people. Gusto naman talaga natin yan. And doon po sa pananahimik, klaro naman po sa sinabi ng Presidente. Ang kailangan po natin sa ngayon, very clear yung sinabi ng Presidente, healthy and democratic debate. So, hindi po tayo pwedeng manahimik dahil napaka-importante po ng problemang hinaharap natin. Kulang ang trabaho, kulang ang kapital. Kung hindi natin to aaksyonan, patuloy pong aalis ang ating mga kababayan para lamang masuportahan ang mga pamilya nila, iiwanan nila ang kanilang mga anak at asawa. Yun po eh. It's an important problem. We need debate. Sana po ay hindi na lang yung tignan as noise. Yung hindi noise eh. Iba yung i-convert natin. Debate po siya. At that's the kind of environment that we seek to foster. one of healthy and democratic. Ibig sabihin, let's make the people participate. So sa Wednesday po, meron po tayong roundtable discussion. Invited ang lahat. Nag-invite tayo ng academe, researchers, members of various government agencies. Tatalakayin po natin ang research na ginawa ng CPBRD. So yun, that's an example of activities that we are doing here in the House to promote healthy and democratic debate as instructed by the President. And number two, sana naman po ay, ang problema kasi is kapag may mga inquiries sa Senado na nakaka-apekto dito po sa pag-achieve natin ng peace, that doesn't help. So, siyempre po, especially kapag na-atake po si Speaker, siya po ang padre de pamilya namin. He takes care of us. We need to also take care of him. So, doon din po kami nanggagaling. So, but, enough said, ang sa amin is, we will stick to healthy and democratic debate.
Any more?
May, na kami, di ba? In effect, I think we're shelving PI. That should be clear to them because that is the instruction of the President. Kumbaga, ano ba yung tawag doon? Cryogenics. Bubuhayin lang namin kung kailangan. So effectively, the instruction of the President is let the Senate do its work on RB 86 and then the House essentially, because that is the implication naman ng 10650 when so hindi naman sa nagrarason ako, but 10650 sabi, so by what rules and regulation naman will we do PI? There's no more rules governing PI. The IRR has been shelved. So effectively, the shelving of the 10650 is in effect a shelving of the PI. So hindi ba, I think sapat na yun para sa Senado na there is no sword of Damocles over them. And that's why, although may mga disagreement kami with respect to the urgency or the deadlines, but at least, we can now have the poison in the atmosphere is no longer there. Wala na doon. Kasi nga, so yun ang implication ng speech ni Presidente doon sa CONSA at yun din ang implication ng pag-shelve ng COMELEC ng 10650. Again, let me repeat, by what rule will the signatures be gathered when the rules have been set aside? So effectively, wala ng PI for now. So it's in a state of cryogenics in the cemetery.
SDS.
Well, good morning sa mga kaibigan sa media. Well, ako naman nandito araw-araw sa almost every day for our press conference. And I was in Makati, Shangri-La last Thursday
Pagbigyan na natin.
with the speaker, of course, DSJJ, Chairman Stella, and of course, Joey Kinig. Ang masasabi ko lang, it's very loud and clear from the President. Number two, we will follow the President. The Speaker will follow the President at kami po lahat dito sa miyembro ng House of Representatives. Number three, while on my way, I'm listening to Joey and Stella, talaga naman. Ito na yung laman, ito na yung discussion. Ito ang sinasabi ni Presidente na healthy democratic discussion ng ating economic provisions. Kaya ngayon po nga oras na to, nag-hearing din sa Senado, sana magtugma na po itong pinag-uusapan natin para dito sa ating dream na magkaroon tayo ng economic provision na charter chains. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat at of course our speaker na talagang hindi na masyadong nakakapahinga dito sa mga usaping ito. So maraming salamat po.
Big Samintak of a follow-up. Okay, sige.
Sir, you mentioned about Council said that in fact, I think we are shelving PI. That should be clear to them. So, can we say na
Pwede,
Congress or Kamara
mali yung word.
nasa likod po
It's
ng
not should be
PI?
an active word. Effectively, PI is shelved
Because of the temporary suspension.
because of the suspension of 10650. So that should clear the air. So takes away the poison, di ba? Pero let the country also be in awe about the democratic process. At no time since 1987 are we so close to finally changing the Constitution. We are so close. Except that the Senate wants to change only 3% of it, whereas the House wants to change almost 20% of it
For economic provisions.
for economic provisions. So, yun lang. On the average, our FDI to total GDP is only 2%. Since 19...
Pero just to add while you're looking, yung 20% Chair Joey, that does not include land, di ba?
Sorry, sir. Sir, can I follow up lang? Kasi Senator Escudero said po last week lang, sabi niya po sa
Okay
mga
lang.
kongresista, lumantad ng mga kongresista, be accountable and admit to the public that they are truly the ones behind the Speaking People's Initiative instead of doing a strict case. Tapos may sinabi pa po siya, those advocating for charter change at this time should present before the Senate Committee credible data na yun nga, yung mga sinasabi po na business community ang pag-amenda. So regarding nila po dun sa admission, be accountable and admit to the public that they are truly the ones behind the Speaking People's Initiative. Your comment po. Thanks,
The
Senator.
comment is, I think it's incumbent upon everyone to follow the president.
And when it comes to showing data, I think
Ayan.
both of them just showed it.
Ito pong
Ano pa ba ang
2016
data?
ASPBI, nagpunta pa kami mismo sa PSA because this is confidential data. So nagpadala
know
pa tayo
that.
ng tao, yes.
Nabigla
Para
nga
lang,
ako na napulot.
in fairness, di ba? Ganun po katindi ang ginagawa po natin na empirical approach to understanding Econ Chacha. And at the same time, as I said, on Wednesday, our own research unit, CPBRD, will present their own findings. Tinignan nila ang FDI inflow sa buong ASEAN, kinumpare nila sa level of restrictiveness. At doon, tinignan ko na ang results. Klaro din na kapag less ang restrictions, mukhang dadami ang FDI inflows. So, hindi naman po hindi kami tumitingin sa datos. At ito na nga po sinishare po natin. But, again, it's nice na umupo tayo at magbalitaktakan tungkol dito. So, yun ang ating wish para sa Valentine's Day.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay na, Marian. We acknowledge Big Samintak of Net25 for his question, and then Lenesca Panti of GMA Online.
So we know na yung House of Representatives, based on your statement after the speech of the President, you are more than willing to follow the President. Kaya lang ang problema, doon sa Senado, although based on the previous PRESSCON by the House leadership, na nag-commit si Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri by March na matatapos nila yung RB86, yung kanilang version, and you are willing to adapt yung kanilang version. Kaya lang, ang problema, sabi ni Senator Angara, by October pa nila ma-actionan yun. At sabi niya, baka mapolitika. So, ano ang dapat gawin ngayon ng is it necessary that the President na magsalita uli o yung Senado? Trabaho na kayo. Kasi sa inyo, malinaw yung signal ng Presidente. Pero on the part of Senate, as bicameral system tayo, mukhang malabo sa kanila yan.
Alam mo, may gray area kasi. Pag natapos na nila, kailangan pa rin magpatawag ng Constituent Assembly na yun ang magiging yun ang magiging agenda ng Constituent Assembly. And in that Constituent Assembly, definitely it will be discussed and therefore it is receptive to certain refinements. So yun ang ibig sabihin siguro ni Senator Angara. Matapos man nila ng March yan, we still need to constitute ourselves as a Constituent Assembly. It is very clear. I've been reading all the statements of the framers of the Constitution. They all say that hindi pwede kami hindi kami pwede approve dito, may approve din doon. So tapos magbabay ka, wala mang ganun. So ang sinusubukan lang ng Senate is to have their own, which will be the proper, kung kami tatanggapin na, okay, si Mix will say, okay, we hereby convene the House and the Senate into a Constituent Assembly. Tapos yun, yung napag-usapan nila ang magiging parang yung sa atin din, di ba? Pinadalan din natin sa kanila. Okay, we are hereby calling the Constituent Assembly with the CONCON as the essentially as the basis, or the RBH2. RBH2 as the basis for the discussion of the Constituent Assembly. So I can understand that from that very generous perspective that the Constituent Assembly still has to discuss what the Senate will approve. Po?
Makakatagal pa rin yung vote.
Ganito talaga ang demokrasya. Pero sabi ko sa iyo, sa talang buhay ko, ngayon lang tayo ang lapit-lapit, malapit-lapit na. Kasi I've been an analyst
Apot kamay.
for much of my mature life. At lagi sinasabi sa lahat ng analysis sa lahat ng country sa buong mundo na ang Pilipinas ang pinakamasikip pasukin. Dahil nga, we are the third most restrictive economy in the world. And all those restrictions are in the Constitution.
Yun ang problema.
Yan ang problema. We're the third. Sino ba talo lang natin?
Wala.
Meron? Saan na pa yun? Ha?
Well, dun sa mga kapitbahay na lang natin, di ba? Kasi kalaban natin sa investments.
Ang talo natin, Libya,
Algeria at Palestine.
Algeria,
Yung mga
Palestine.
tinalo din natin sa teams.
Oh, yun lang. Yun din ang tinalo natin sa team, sa Kapisa. Oh, yun. Eto. Tayo ang pinakamasikip. So, at least ako masaya-saya na ako na may gumagalaw na sa Senado. At sana pagdating dito sa House, magkakaroon tayo ng isang vigorous and vigorous discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ako, just to add, binasa ko actually yung transcript nung interview ni Sen Sani. Hindi naman niya sinabi na October. Ang sinabi niya, ang latest is October. Yun ang sabi niya, latest. Pero, kung mas maaga, mas maigi. Sinabi naman niya yun. So, and this was before the President spoke. So, tingin ko, baka maging iba ang kanilang pagtingin dito. And number two, babalikan ko yung very restrictive economic provisions. Again, it's because our economic policies are cast in stone in the Constitution that makes us unattractive. So, ang gusto natin is gawin siyang legislation as opposed to Constitution. In other words, sa Kongreso na lang ipapasa ang mga batas or ang mga ahensya na lang ang maglalabas ng mga regulations. Ang kagandahan kasi doon is kung sakali man nagkamali ang Kongreso, hindi naman infallible ang Kongreso, pwedeng itama. Yun di ba? It cuts both ways. So kung mali, halimbawa, sa restrictions on ownership, sa tingin natin sa ngayon, biruin mo, mass communication, advertising, zero. Hindi pwedeng pumasok at all. O, ano ang tamang numero? Pwede natin pagdebatian.
Kaya nagsara CNN.
O, yun na nga, CNN Philippines nagsara. O, so halimbawa, we started with, halimbawa sabihin natin, 75%. Pero kung nagkamali tayo, pwede natin baguhin, pwede natin pababain. So, yun ang value ng paglilipat ng mga economic policies away from the Constitution towards legislation.
Ma'am, one last na lang. So, hinihintay po ng House yung approval ng Article 6, which is Constitutional Assembly. So, may isang punto doon na maaaring magkaroon na naman ng problema is yung pagboto. Kung nagkaroon kayo ng nag-convene as Constituent Assembly, voting separately or jointly. So, ano yung pinaka-middle ground na
Wala man middle ground na yun. Pag na-approve na nila, si Senate President Subiri or jointly with the Speaker will call us into a Constituent Assembly. And we will vote separately. Because bicameral nga eh. Hindi naman nila napalitan yun. Yun lang naman eh. So, the burden of the proof is on the unicameral school of thought. Because they changed it to bicam, pero hindi naman nila bicam yung buong constitution pagdating sa mga proseso. So, sa tingin ko, pag masa-aprobahan lang nila yung gusto nilang ipatawag, so magdi-declare sila, yung Senate is now ready for a Constituent Assembly, and we invite the House to join us, or they join, they say, okay, we are now constituted as a Constituent Assembly. So, yun ang nga problema dyan eh. Pag in-approve nila dyan, pagdating sa Constituent Assembly, sky is the limit din naman ang topic dun eh.
Hindi maliwanag. Konsensya lang tayo.
Yun ang problema dyan eh. Kaya hindi ko maintindihan kung ano yung pinag-aawayan. Kasi pag nag-Constituent Assembly tayo, ganun din. Kaso, doon sa isa, panalo agad yung House. Sa PI, di ba? Pero ngayon, at least ngayon, pag voting separately, we can discuss the whole thing, even those things which they call political. Because we have to constitute, there's no way that we cannot constitute a Constituent Assembly to change. It's either we call a CONCON, ayaw Manila, we have a Constituent Assembly, which is probably we will have some form of, or PI, which they don't like. So we have only one recourse, Constituent Assembly. But once we're constituted assembly, any topic can now be raised. So, okay lang, but at least we're there. We're very near like that.
Sir, you are recognized in Escapante of GMA Online for a question.
Inalan na to ni Kong Stella kanina. Just want to make it, kumbaga, explicit para clear yung message. Walang ambiguity, as you pointed out. You mentioned about Senate inquiry being, parang targeting the Speaker being somewhat not helping foster this healthy discussion and debate. So, would you call, so the question is for everybody, would you reiterate the House's call to the Senate na since 10650 is shelved,
Yes.
already shelved, should the Senate stop the PI inquiry?
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. I follow the hearings for the two hearings that they've had, and wala po silang napatunayan na merong nakatanggap ng pera o di umano sa kapalit ng kanilang pirma. May mga pangako, may mga sinabi na magbibigay, kasi wala naman silang naipakita na meron talagang tumanggap at meron talagang nabigyan. So, it's starting to look like a witch hunt. And of course, it's not helping the interparliamentary relations between the Senate and the House of Representatives. So if we are to move forward and go to a direction wherein we want to focus on what the President has mentioned, which is achieving a goal by 2025, siguro dapat doon nakafocus ang lahat ng mga energy, resources at kakayahan natin para masiguro natin na may pasakagad natin yung yung economic provisions sa ligang batas sa madaling panahon. So, we shouldn't be distracted with our work. We shouldn't be distracted with our legislative actions. The President has already given us an order in what needs to be done, and I think both houses have to act accordingly.
Yun na makukot.
Alam mo, tinatawag kasi nilang peking PI. Peking initiative. Alam niyo po, ito mayor ko. Yung mayor ko, ang sabi sa akin, sabi niya, partner, wala ka man nasa abroad ka. Pero ako ang pinakaunang nagbasa ng form na pinakita sa akin at ako ang pinakaunang pumirma. Ako ang pinakaunang pumirma. At gusto ko talaga maamienda. Nung nabasa ko yung mga questionnaires, gusto ko talaga maamienda yung konstitusyon. Ngayon, ang tanong lang doon, bakit tatawagan mong peking initiative yun? Mayor na nga yung pumirma. Ano? Ibig sabihin, mayor ba, hindi niya alam ang ginagawa niya? Kaya on that town, believe it or not, 25% almost na signature ang nag-gather nila doon without any single centavo. 1 sentimo walang gastos. Kaya yung sinasabi po nilang paratang na pera, may bigayan, ni 5 po, inuulit ko palagi sa interview ko, walang ni 5 binigay sa mga taong pumirma. Kaya insulto po sa taong bayan pag sinabi mong peking inisyatibo. Kaya nga People's Initiative Kami nga, congressman, sabi nga ni Mayor ako pero people din ako Diba? So yun lang, kaya medyo parang nakakasakit yun. Thank you.
Okay, we can only entertain the last 3 questions from Merla of PTB4, Milky Regonan of DZRH, and Joy Canto sa Filipino Star ngayon.
Hi, Congs. Good afternoon po.
Ayaw na makipag-away.
Quick 2 questions lang po. Kasi yung ibang senador, like Senator Cheese Escudero, inaabangan pa nila yung specific details ng provisions na gusto ni President BBM ng economic provisions na dapat amyendahan. Sa tingin niyo po ba, kailangan pang maglabas ang Malacanang kung ano yung specific provisions na gusto ni Pangulo na amyendahan? Or dito na pumapasok yung healthy debate sa pagitan ng dalawang kapulungan ng Kongreso na as lawmakers sa atin po yung magagaling?
Stella.
Tingin ko wag na natin hintayin At tamang sinasabi ninyo na makukuha natin yan sa healthy debate. Dahil ang isa halimbawa na magiging subject to debate tiyak is yung pagdating sa land. Kasi kahit dito sa House, walang consensus po pagdating sa land. Which is why in the previous Congress, yung na-approve po natin na version did not include land. So it's a very emotional topic, and at the same time, ang tagal-tagal na natin gustong-gusto magkaroon ng isang National Land Use Act at hindi natin maipasa. So, mahirap talaga pagdating sa land. So, yun ang mga bagay na sa totoo lang at this point in time, pwede muna nating sukuan dahil mahirap talaga tayong makahanap ng consensus pagdating dyan. But for all others, pagdating sa public utilities, that had been debated so many times on the floor. Pagdating sa BICAM, I was a member of that. Matinding debate din na nangyari dyan. So tingin ko, cut and dried na yan. Pagdating sa education because of the PISA results, pagdating sa mining, pagdating sa advertising because wala na tayong borders ngayon Wala nang ibig sabihin ng physical borders ngayon. Pagdating sa sektor tulad ng, that's very digitalized, tulad ng advertising. So, merong iba dyan na talagang the consensus can be easily formed. Diba? So, considering na maliit lang ang window in terms of time ang tinitignan natin, Ngayon pa lang, alam na natin more or less kung ano ang magiging sakop ng Econ Chacha.
Ang pananaw ko dyan, mukhang magkakaroon tayo ng serial chacha. Hindi Big Bang chacha. Kasi gawa nga kung saan kami nanggaling kami sa isang panahon na duda. Duda dun sa kabila, duda din dito. So mukhang may mga sabing...
Netflix ang peg.
Ano, Koreano ba? Hindi. So I think we will have a serial chacha. I think every president would like to make an impact really simply because of the political atmosphere that we're in. Not because of it is the right thing. It is the only thing. It is the only right thing to do. Na hindi naman yun lang ang pwedeng gawin. Kundi yun lang ang kaya.
At hindi pa right.
Gawa nga galing kami sa isang malaking away. So at least may mapagkasundaan man lang na ikakasulong ng ekonomiya. Mukhang sa tingin ko, it's better for the country at this point in time. Pero sana naman, wag naman yung basic education, doon natin kailangan yung we're number 78 out of 78 in science.
Math also, and reading.
75. Number 75 out of 78 in reading, 75 out of 78. Sa science, we're number 78 out of 78. And we're talking about PISA at grade 4.
Not in absolute terms, but in relative terms.
So that is where we need a lot of this,
Which is a problem also.
with a lot of investments in education. Far more basic education, because grade 4 is basic.
Okay. Milgi Rigonan of DZRH.
Ay?
Good afternoon, sirs. And ma'am, moving on, since the President said that he will support the amendments of CHACHA on the economic provisions, no more, no less. So sa Senado, ang sabi ni Senator Nancy Binay, ipapasa nila this week ang legislated wage hike na 100 pesos as a Valentine's gift to the manggagawa. Sa Senado ba? Kamara, meron ba tayong counterpart na pang Valentine's Day gift din sa mga manggagawa?
Scary yun.
Alam mo, may problema tayo sa golden rule eh. Whenever Congress tinkers with the law of demand and supply, we turn gold into bronze. So that is the golden rule. So I think we already a workable arrangement, which is the tripartite, regional-based. Kasi bakit mo naman ilalagay, so sa mga malalaking, kung kaya lang kasing iwalayin yung mga malalaking kumpanya, pwede sana yun eh. Kaso tatamaan yan SMEs eh, mamamatay lahat yun eh. Kasi hindi nila kakayanin eh. Hindi nila talaga kakayanin. Kumbaga, 99% ng lahat ng enterprise natin, SMEs. So, katulad sabi kanina ni na ang mga foreign investors in the Philippines give 74% more wages than Filipino enterprises. So, doon ulit papasok yung pangangailangan po ng charter change for economic provisions. So I think a signal in this sense, kasi at this point I think it will have to be the president sending signals to the regional tripartite wage boards to discuss the possible adjustments in the wages, because it worked. I haven't seen this thing. Hindi naman siya non-responsive sa nangyayari. Ibig sabihin, wala ka naman nakita na isang unintended consequence of killing all the SMEs. Kasi may mga SME hindi kakayanin ng 600 pesos per day So imbis na mayroon man lang makakuha man lang ng 400, magtatanggal sila para lang kayanin nila yung yung 700. Kasi obviously, nasa 600 tayo ngayon, di ba? Plus 100 equals 700. Ako, I am sympathetic really to wage hikes. Except that for one reason, 99% of our enterprise are SMEs. So would you like to kill them? So that's the only issue there. So we need to increase a more expansive macroeconomic environment, and that can only come
With Chacha. With Econ Chacha.
with foreign investment.
Yes. And pag magtataas po tayo ng minimum wage, this means this is for all firms. Ano sa tingin ninyo ang mangyayari? Ang gagawin po ng mga kumpanya is ipapasa po nila ang pagtaas ng wage
Inflation.
sa presyo. Kaya po, aasahan po natin na inflationary po yan. So, magkakaroon tayo ng cost push inflation, ika nga. So, you will temporarily satisfy our workers who are also consumers, hindi po ba? So, eventually, yung tinaas sa sahod nila ay kakainin din naman po dun sa pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin. Sa ngayon po, inflation is the biggest problem that we face. So, yun ang, kaya nga ginagawa ng Presidente ang lahat, ginagawa ng Speaker ang lahat para tugunan ang inflation. So, kung titignan natin ang pag-prioritize ng mga problema, tingin ko talagang directly we need to deal with the problem, the sources of inflation. Yung minimum wage, pwede po natin yan itaas kapag nagkakaroon tayo ng productivity increases. Ang problema, yung PISA results ni Chair Joey, it does not indicate such. So ang kailangan natin, palaguin ang ekonomiya, kaya po tayo nandito at nagpo-push for economic chacha. So, maganda po na pinag-iisipan ang minimum wage. Ang sa amin lang is, pag-isipan natin ng mabuti yung timing po. Unahin natin ang directly tugunan ng inflation, palaguin natin ang ekonomiya, and then we can talk about increases in minimum wage.
Yeah. Just to add, no, I'd vote for Joey Salceda and Stella to be members of the Senate.
Oh my goodness.
So
Second emotion.
for the past 5 years, I've been defending the budget of Dole, and that has been a perennial question. And I think the answer of Joey hits it direct to the point. Meron naman tayong mechanisms to address minimum wage in the different regions, and they're all working. In fact, in the past few months, we have seen increases in minimum wage in Calabarzon, in the Visayas. Tatlo lang ang hindi nakapagtaas ng sahod. So, but the rest, nagtaas ng sahod base sa kakayahan ng kanilang rehiyon na dinidikta ng manggagawa at ng industriya. Ngayon, kung arbitrary, sasabihin mo, taasan lahat, tama yung sinabi ni Joey. Kunyari, ang negosyo mo ay nag-aayos ka ng cellphone. Ang trabahador mo, 4. Pag tinaasan mo lahat ng sahod nun, it's either magbabawas ka ng trabahador or magsasara ka.
Or magtatago ka. Forever.
So, I mean, you know, it sounds nice, it feels nice, but once it gets there, it might not be very nice. So, we need to, I think, put more trust in the mechanisms that government has placed to address this issue. And adding to what Stella said, you just really need a bigger economy with more money and more industry players so that we can have more maneuverability when it comes to labor laws and practices.
Thank you. You're recognized, Joy Cantos of Filipino Star ngayon for today's last question.
Sige lang.
Sir, from my standpoint, how can the government ensures a balanced approach to economic revision in the Philippine charter chains? And what are the potential risks
Ang haba ng question. Hindi ko alam kung saan ako sisimula eh.
Sir, doon na lang po tayo sa balanced approach. How can you ensure a balanced approach to economic revision in the Philippine Charter of States?
I think a national conversation is where you start that. Kung anong mabuti, kasi para mailabas naman ninyo, okay lang ba sa inyo na hindi natin kakayanin yung 100 pesos? Hindi. Deep in my heart, I think businesses should be able to absorb 100 pesos if they will not pass it on. Eh, they will pass it on eh. Or if baka maglalaglag lang sila ng
Empleyado.
ng empleyado. So, wala din. Kasi ang problema nga, ang sikip-sikip natin, hindi natin pinapapasok yung mga pwede magpalago ng ekonomiya para meron tayong espasyo for higher wages when productivity is rising.
Technology.
And we can have technology that increases productivity, and therefore you can do more with less, and therefore prices goes down. So, pero napaka traditional orthodoxy na yan eh. Actually, at the end of the day, hindi ko man sinasabi na ang rason, pero pag-aralan mo, simula 1902, sa bawat bago mo ng konstitusyon, may isang country na lalampas sa atin. Every time we change this constitution, it's always towards the restrictions. 1902, 1935, 1972, 1987. Every time, noong 1902, nalampasan tayo ng Malaysia. 1935, nalampasan tayo ng Indonesia. 1972, nalampasan tayo ng Thailand. Ngayon naman, lalampasan tayo ng Vietnam.
Nalampasan na.
Nalampasan na because we keep restricting the entry of foreign investors. Para may takot tayo sa kanila na ayaw mo niyan, pag pinasok nila dito yung factory nila, hindi naman nila makakarga palabas yun. O kung bumili sila ng lupa, bigla sila natakot, hindi naman nila madadala yung lupa pauwi. Bakit takot na takot tayo? So, ang kailangan tayong pag-usapan. We need national conversation.
Sinatry kong intindihin kung saan nanggagaling si ma'am dun sa pagbalanse. Tingin ko halimbawa na lang sa basic education na sinasabi ni Chair Joey. So, ang sinasabi niyo po ba, ma'am, paano yun kung may papasok dito na isang foreign-owned school? Paano yun? Baka naman pagdating sa curriculum, yung mga bata hindi na marunong magtagalog. Baka yun ang sinasabi po ninyo. Siyempre magandang palaisipan. Pero at the end of the day, there's one rule in economics, which is for every problem, you need one policy tool. Hindi pwedeng, if you have two problems, isang policy tool lang ang gagamitin. So, if the problem is bringing the lack of capital, so ang tool natin is i-conchacha. Pero, para masigurado na balansyado ang ating curriculum, ay kailangan natin ng another policy tool, which is an effective DepEd. So, ang mga schools naman natin, kahit naman po ang international schools natin, meron tayong BSM, ISM, Brent, at kung ano-ano pa, sila naman po ay nagfa-follow ng DepEd rules and regulations. So as long as meron tayong effective na regulators, ay tingin ko doon papasok yung pagbabalanse.
Okay, with that, we're ending our press conference. Thank you to our guest, Ma'am Stella, Chairman Joey, Senior Deputy Speaker Dong, and Deputy Speaker JJ. And also to thank you for joining us, and to all the members of media for your participation. Have a great day.
Itong dalawang hindi yata nakapasa. Nakalagay sa instructions sa amin, follow the president.
Oo nga, nandun na raw sila sa meeting room.
Inaway mo pa rin.
Punta na tayo, sir.